Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Madison Cooper adjusted the collar of her white coat with an almost automatic gesture, as if the fabric gave her the armor she needed to maintain the composure everyone expected of her. She was the kind of woman who commanded respect the moment she walked into any room, not by raising her voice, but by standing tall, looking people in the eye, and projecting the self-confidence she had built over years in medicine. At 37, with a solid career, she was regarded by colleagues and supervisors as a model of excellence and leadership. In the hospital halls, interns watched her with admiration, patients always trusted her diagnoses, and administrators saw her as the ideal face to represent the institution. But behind all that prestige lay a deep restlessness. An inner silence that echoed even when everything around her seemed under control. At home, the scene was the opposite of the bustling shifts and delicate surgeries. Ethan, her husband, was the definition of stability, kind, methodical, and extremely polite. He prepared breakfast carefully, with the silverware lined up on the table, bread sliced perfectly, and the newspaper folded next to her mug. He watched the same shows every night, laughed at the same simple jokes, and seemed content with the predictable routine they had built. More than once, Madison wondered if this life many would call a dream, a peaceful home, a steady marriage, a successful career, was truly what she wanted. The invitation to a medical conference in Barcelona arrived by email one random afternoon, somewhere between an administrative meeting and seeing a patient. It was one of those major events that brings together specialists from around the world, featuring cutting-edge topics, rooms filled with brilliant minds, and evenings in seaview hotels. She accepted without thinking twice, and as soon as she confirmed her attendance, she felt an inexplicable surge of relief. It was as if this trip were more than just a professional commitment. As if it were, in some way, a carefully disguised escape. On the night before she left, Ethan cooked her favorite meal, grilled salmon with vegetables and almond rice, and affectionately mentioned how much he would miss her, asking her to call as soon as she arrived. Madison smiled and thanked him, but deep down she couldn't wait to walk out that door the next morning. While loading dresses into the taxi's trunk, she felt a strange excitement coursing through her veins. Like she was about to do something forbidden, yet necessary. And maybe she was. The moment she stepped into the hotel lobby in Barcelona, she was immediately enveloped by an air of sophistication. The polished marble floors reflected the golden light of the main chandelier, a subtle scent of white flowers drifted from the central arrangement, and the soft piano music in the background gave the place a near-cinematic atmosphere. Far from the familiarity of her hometown, everything felt different. Possible. Alive. During the first panels of the conference, she stayed focused, taking notes and joining the discussions. That was when she met Julian Hart. He was a renowned surgeon with dozens of published articles, a charismatic presence, and the kind of smile that seems to read people before he even speaks. His bright, penetrating eyes met hers during a break between sessions. For some reason Madison didn't immediately understand, it awakened something in her that had been dormant for a long time. Julian approached her naturally, complimenting her presentation and asking about a new technique she had mentioned. Next to him, Madison didn't feel the need to pretend she was always perfectly fine. She smiled genuinely, laughed out loud, talked about dreams she had shelved away, and he listened with real attention. It was as though every word she spoke mattered, as if every detail of her story fascinated him. That disarmed her because she'd grown used to being heard with respect, but not with true interest. Their encounters, which at first seemed casual, became increasingly intense. Grabbing coffee after a lecture. Sharing wine by the hotel pool. Strolling along the beach at night, shoes in hand, the sound of the waves filling the comfortable silence between conversations. Their talks escalated quickly, and with them, so did their closeness. Julian opened up about the pressure of being so well known, about always feeling he had to stay one step ahead in his career. He spoke about how his marriage had become more of a formality, an arrangement with no love or passion. Madison listened, absorbed what he said, and opened up in return. For the first time, she admitted out loud that she felt alone in her own life, that there was a huge difference between seeming happy and actually being happy. Julian touched her hand with natural ease, looking at her with both desire and admiration, and it was something she hadn't felt in ages. On the third night, after dinner at a small, elegant restaurant by the sea, Madison allowed herself to give in. No excuses, no masks. She surrendered to the desire that had grown like fire inside her, and that night, it consumed everything around them. The room was quiet, but inside her, the whole world was screaming. The rush of truly living, of being in the eye of an emotional storm, made her heart pound like never before. Every touch, every whispered word, every moment with Julian seemed to fill the emptiness that had weighed on her chest for so long. For a few hours, Madison forgot about the husband who slept on the same side of the bed every night, forgot about the hospital, her responsibilities, even the name of the city she lived in. It was like only that place existed, that man, and the new woman she was becoming with him. A woman who made her own choices, who felt, who breathed freedom. But freedom sometimes carries a heavy price, and in that moment, Madison was far from imagining how high that price would be. While Madison enjoyed the soft morning breeze on the Spanish coast and Julian Hart's mesmerizing attention, on the other side of the ocean, Ethan was facing the biggest chasm of his life, but in silence. The message arrived on Wednesday, a little after 9 at night. Ethan was in the office of the mansion where he and Madison lived, the very same room that had once been his father's study. The dark wooden bookcases, the red carpet worn at the edges, and the old clock ticking each second with precision were living memories of a family that no longer existed. His parents had died 5 years earlier in a car accident on a foggy road. As an only child, Ethan inherited not just the family business but also the fortune they had built over decades, stocks, real estate, and that imposing mansion at the top of the hill. The house symbolized everything his parents had stood for: discreet elegance, tradition, stability. Even after he got married, he never considered selling or dividing it. The property was entirely his. A parting gift, an emotional anchor. Madison had always known that. Still, over time, she began treating it like it was hers, redecorating rooms, swapping out historic furniture for modern pieces, imposing her taste as if she had a right to every wall. But in that moment, seated in that worn leather chair, Ethan saw more than just the shadows of his parents in the walls. He saw his married life falling apart in silence before his very eyes. The email was straightforward. Signed by Helena Hart, Julian's wife, she explained that she had grown suspicious and hired a private detective to investigate her husband. She described, with cold precision, everything she discovered: Julian's involvement with Madison, their meetings at the hotel, the hidden smiles between lectures, the embraces that went beyond professionalism. The attached photos left no room for doubt. Madison was involved, fully committed, and completely at ease in another man's arms. Ethan spent more than an hour staring at the computer screen, unmoving. He could feel his pulse pounding in his temples, but the rest of his body stayed motionless, almost petrified. Madison's name in the photo caption seemed to scream at him. The copied messages in the body of the email were intimate and raw, destroying any hope that there was some mistake or misunderstanding. She had betrayed him, and willingly. She had made her choices, and now, he would make his. That same night, Ethan walked through the mansion without making a sound. He stopped in the hallway with the family photos, pausing for a moment in front of the old portrait on the stairway. He felt something that went beyond pain, a quiet outrage at everything they had built, which she had now disgraced. The next morning, he called his personal lawyer and arranged a private meeting. Within 48 hours, he started the process to sell the mansion. Because it had always been in his name, he didn't need Madison's signature or any marital authorization. The property was solely his, just like the rest of his inherited assets. Meanwhile, he plotted his revenge the way he'd run a professional project. He filed the documents Helena had sent into physical folders, printed out each photo, and bound the messages. He hired a professional to handle the details of putting the house on the market, and quietly began clearing out rooms, removing family art, valuables, and sentimental items. Madison was still in Barcelona, exchanging smiling selfies with friends and enjoying dinners overlooking the Mediterranean. The last message she had sent him the previous night said, "I love you. Can't wait to see you." Ethan read those words without any reaction. He was already beyond the point of pain. A few days later, when Madison finally arrived, dragging her suitcases from the taxi and wearing the same carefree look she'd had when she left, she felt a knot form in her stomach. Something was off. The afternoon sun was glinting on the sign stuck into the lawn, a simple white sign with bold red letters that read, "For sale." She blinked a few times, as if her eyes were playing tricks on her. That sign was definitely there. She stood there for a moment, trying to rationalize. Maybe Ethan had put it there by mistake. Maybe it belonged to a neighbor and someone had just set it down. But as her heart raced, her mind already knew, that house, until now the symbol of stability and their perfect life, was no longer hers. She took a few determined steps, although her body was trembling inside. She walked over to the living room window. The glass reflected her pale, confused face. She looked inside. The armchair where she used to read at night was gone. The bookcase was gone. Most of the decor she had personally chosen was nowhere to be seen. Some large pieces were still around the corners, but the space was so empty it echoed, like it had been vacant for days. She pulled the keyring out of her purse and tried the main key in the lock. It wouldn't turn. She tried another. Nothing. None of the keys worked. She stood there with her hand on the doorknob, her eyes fixed on the deadbolt, as though that little piece of metal was the cold response to everything she had done. She pulled out her phone, breathing quickly, and called Ethan. He picked up with the same calm, steady voice he always had, no hesitation, like he'd been expecting that call. "Go to the mailbox, Madison. I left an envelope there for you." Then he hung up. She walked to the edge of the driveway, opened the old iron mailbox, and found a heavy manila envelope. Inside were dozens of printed photos. She recognized the scenes right away, her smiling with Julian, hugging on the hotel stairs, the looks they shared, the touches. All of it was there, every detail of the affair, meticulously documented. Below the photos was a stack of papers, divorce documents, already signed by Ethan, every clause spelled out by his lawyer. She read every line, her vision blurred by tears that fell uncontrollably. She sat on the curb, right then and there, hands shaking. She picked up her phone again. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried a second time. And a third. Then she sent a message, "Ethan, please. Can we talk? I need to explain." The little check marks showed he'd read it. But no reply ever came. With her bag still on the ground and her heart in pieces, Madison went to Vanessa's place, her best friend from college. She didn't need to say much. Vanessa greeted her with a long, wordless hug, and Madison finally broke down. She spent the night there, crying, curled up in the guest bed that smelled of lavender, a scent that, painfully and ironically, reminded her of her old home. But the cruelest blow was still ahead. Determined to expose the whole truth, Helena sent all the evidence to the hospital where Madison worked. Not only that, but she sent copies to the board of directors at the hospital where Julian was chief surgeon. In no time, halls once filled with nods and polite smiles turned into corridors full of awkward silences. Conversations died whenever Madison passed by. The looks she got were no longer respectful, but filled with judgment, and, most painfully of all, disappointment. Although the hospital board took no formal action, she hadn't done anything illegal in her clinical work, the environment became unbearable. She lost the sparkle in her eyes, the confidence in her stance, the pleasure of putting on her coat. She avoided the cafeteria, dreaded in-person meetings, and eventually typed up her resignation letter with trembling hands and a heart drowning in shame. The following week, on a cloudy day, her face still drawn with exhaustion, Madison gathered the courage to do what she'd been rehearsing every day since everything fell apart. She asked Ethan to meet in person. He agreed. They met in a quiet cafe away from downtown, where no one would recognize them. When Madison arrived, he was already there by the window, a cup of black coffee in front of him. She sat down slowly, placing her purse in her lap, and stayed silent for a few seconds. Ethan's face was serious, but calm. He looked at her with the eyes of someone who no longer felt anger, only the sorrow of having been broken inside. "Ethan. I'm so sorry. I know I destroyed you. I know I was selfish, cruel. I messed up everything we built. You were always so good to me. I just want you to forgive me. I regret every second of it." She spoke with genuine remorse, her voice cracking, her soul laid bare. Ethan said nothing the entire time, just watched her without a single nod or shake of his head. When she finished, eyes full of tears and breathing unevenly, he placed his cup gently on its saucer, stood up calmly, and said, "I forgive you, Madison. Because living with this bitterness would be like carrying poison inside me. And I want to be free of that. But, I never want to see you again." With those words, he turned and walked out of the cafe, passing through the door with his hands in his pockets, disappearing down the sidewalk like someone finally closing a wound. Madison stayed there, frozen, her eyes on the space he'd just left. At that moment, she understood that forgiveness doesn't always open the door to a second chance. Sometimes, it's simply the end. A week later, with her soul in pieces and nothing tying her to that city anymore, Madison said goodbye to her friend, sold what was left of her personal belongings, and flew to Cancun. Far from it all, on a beach where no one knew her, she decided to start over. She rented a small house, took a deep breath, and opened a simple clinic, its white walls facing the sea. The woman who once thought she could control everything now understood the power of humility, rebuilding, and the loneliness that sometimes follows. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.